Are you antisocial? Are you uninterested in justice? Are you almost anything but a warrior? Well, you might just be the person social justice warriors are looking for. I'm Steve Green with Bill Whittle and Scott Ott, and this is the right angle on people who think they're making a difference, as exposed in a new viral video. Gents, an old Twitter buddy of mine, KL Norvell, he sent me this protest video. I think it's from Russia from just a few days ago, and has been retweeted 9,000 or 10,000 times already. I don't know how many YouTube video hits it has. And here it is. What we see is a typical social justice warrior working for change or whatever. All right, in the interest of fairness, it was some internet smarty pants who added the scream, which didn't actually happen. But I want to go to Scott first on this one. Scott, for me at least, the real revelation in this video isn't the social justice warrior with her balloon. It's not the cop finally taking the balloon away and still looking patient as he's doing. It's the second social justice warrior providing her with such concerned comfort in her dire moment of need. Yeah, just how much artifice can two SJWs cram into 10 seconds of video?
And it's hard to know whether these people are sincerely experiencing these emotions and these feelings, or whether they're just part of a, calculating organization that's trying to spur a reaction from government or from somebody else. And frankly, in most movements, there are both kinds. You have the people at the top who are just callous, cold-hearted, ambitious, craven people who are, Saul Alinsky-like manipulating the people at the lower level. They're taking advantage of the genuine emotions felt by, they may be crazy emotions, but they're genuine emotions felt by a lot of people. And so they get them involved in it, and they get them fired up and passionate about it, and they're frankly using these people. What I find fascinating about the video, by the way, is the fact that if you're protesting against the injustice done by big, powerful government to the poor, helpless little people, the very fact that you could stand in the face of a law enforcement officer and taunt them like that and no harm comes to you is an endorsement of whatever government that is. I mean, it wasn't too long ago when anybody who stood up like that was immediately batoned down to the ground. And so it reminds me of a time when I was in a convenience store. I believe it was up in the Poconos, and I went in, and this was a few years ago now, and there was a young man wearing a T-shirt that had George W. Bush with a pair of vampire fangs, and he was biting the neck of Lady Liberty, the Statue of Liberty. And there was like blood trickling down the neck of the Statue of Liberty. And it was this T-shirt that was supposed to visually portray the evil of this government destroying our liberty and everything. And I went over to the person and I said, "Hey, you better be careful about wearing that T-shirt in public. If the Bushies find out about that, you're done."
Oh, Lord.
And of course, the irony is he could walk around the White House all year long wearing that shirt and nothing would happen to him.
Oh, yeah. There probably was somebody in the White House wearing that T-shirt just as a gag, and I'll bet you, W was probably laughing about it himself. And that's not to say there isn't real injustice in the world, and especially in Russia there is, which is why, Bill, last week you reminded our viewers that Americans have fun even after Daddy takes the T-bird away. What happens to a social justice warrior when the policeman takes her balloon away?
Well, as you can see, she collapses into a ball of infancy, and that's what we see everywhere. It wasn't too long ago that we were treated to the spectacle of, was it Snugglepuff? Is that who it was called? Did you guys surely must know the name?
No.
Snugglepuff is that extremely overweight person who was chanting, "We are not children, we are not children," and she made a hilarious scene of herself. And was just branded Snugglepuff by the internet, which I'm sure made her very happy. Look, these people are infants, and the more we coddle them, the more they demand to be coddled further. The whole idea of a safe space is the idea that, a safe space now, you would think a safe space would mean what you would think it would mean, a place where you wouldn't be assaulted. That's not what safe spaces are for on college campuses. A safe space is you can go where you don't have to hear anything different than what you already believe. This is the first generation we've ever sent to college that is going to come out stupider than they went in, and much stupider, much stupider. This is the function of the left. The left is designed to do a couple of different things. It's designed to make people dependent on the government, and the best way to make people dependent on you is to make sure they never grow up, right? I mean, infants and babies and young infants, 5, 6 months old, are dependent on you for everything. And the more emotionally dependent these people are, the better the government likes it, because they simply have no place else to go. One of the most interesting things I saw in regard to this issue, Steve, had to do with a guy who I think was on what's the man who Alexis Jonanicus.
Infowars.
What's the name of his Infowars?
Yeah,
yes,
Infowars.
The name that cannot be spoken in the place that shall but not be named. But this kid was a young British kid, and I thought he had a really great point. He was pointing to some of these social justice warriors and their absolute meltdowns. By the way, these are the first warriors who will faint dead away at the sight of somebody opening a jackknife. It's kind of an unusual term for them to use for themselves. But he basically said something I think has a lot of merit. He said that this is the result not only of the self-esteem movement, but it's also the result of the home daycare movement. That his point was that these people are acting out because they didn't get the individual love and attention and care that they should have gotten as children. And he makes a further point, which I think is even more valid. He says if you are one child in the afternoon and you're in a daycare center and there's one stressed out daycare person caring for you, the way that you get attention is by who's going to throw the biggest fit.
Oh, boy.
Who's going to throw the biggest fit? And then once you throw the biggest fit, you get a little attention, not 1/30th of mom's attention. You get the whole thing because you're now the center of attention. I think that's pretty much exactly right. Of all the things that I'm afraid about, and I'm afraid of the debt, and I'm worried about the Russians, and I'm worried about the Chinese, and I'm worried about Al-Qaeda, ISIS, I'm worried about all this stuff. The one thing that terrifies me is the quality of this millennial generation in terms of their ability to deal with it. With that said, I always have to stop by saying, the millennials that are out there serving in the military now are the deadliest sons of guns that we've ever fielded, and the smartest ones too. And the generation is actually very virtuous. They want to do the right thing. They've just been told that they're socialists, and they've been told that they can't compete. Social justice warriors, Steve, rather. You have to understand, these are people that could never compete. They're not allowed to compete in sports. No one comes in first. Everybody gets a participant trophy. The only place that these people can compete in is to see who can be the biggest victim and who can be the most morally outraged by less and less injustice.
Scott, I want to give you a quick follow-up that I wanted to get into this. It's been kind of a light episode. But, real protesters, people fighting for civil rights in this country in the 1960s, they faced down fire hoses and police dogs, tear gas. Some were even murdered. And a few years ago, just 7 years ago, we witnessed an Iranian woman taken down in the streets by a Revolutionary Guard's sniper bullet. So what do these social justice warriors know about really taking it to the man like they think they are?
Well, and as you seem to lay that contrast out, it trivializes the legitimate battle for freedom. This is not Tiananmen Square, buddy. Especially most of what's going on in college campuses in the United States. And, as Bill was talking about having safe places, well, I am actually a big fan of safe spaces because those safe spaces will become magnets to the liberals who, if we allow them to just wander freely across the campus, are likely to try to clamp down on my free speech. So I think that they should all just go in there. I feel safer when they're in the safe place. There are legitimate civil rights battles being fought around the world right now. I mean, where is the U.S. women's movement? Where is the Democrat Party, for example, on the victims of Islam around the world, of the radical jihadist Islamic governments that are, doing female circumcision, and they're treating women like chattel, and they're, you want to get upset about women's rights, go somewhere in the Arab countries and start talking about it there. And it's funny because now we hear criticisms like, oh, well, the Republicans eventually got around to apologizing for some racial indiscretion. The Baptists eventually got around to apologizing for their support of slavery or whatever. It's like, okay, well, Democrats, when are you going to get around to apologizing for what you're doing right now by making it seem like some little pansy at a college campus in the United States has a legitimate civil rights grievance while you utterly ignore the plight of millions of abused women.
Yeah.
I just want to add one thing.
Sure, Bill.
It goes to the question you just brought back to Scott. The term social justice warrior is like everything else with this generation. It's narcissistic, self-serving, and wrong. It doesn't. They're not warriors. Warriors take casualties. These people don't take casualties. A social justice warrior is the guy who stood in front of those tanks in Tiananmen Square, because that kid that stood in front of that line of tanks, that unknown Chinese protester that stood in front of that line of tanks in Tiananmen Square, had earlier that morning and during the previous night seen those tanks run over hundreds of his fellow students. So when you see people grinding under the treads of tanks and then you stand in front of a tank, knowing full well that these people have already committed mass murder, that's actual courage.
Yeah.
And what these people want, what these spoiled, narcissistic kids want, is they want to identify with that courage by, sticking it to the man and speaking truth to power. There's no risk at all. None. There's no risk at all. None. So the fact that they're in a situation where there's no physical courage required tells you a fair amount about what kind of people these are and how inflated their sense of self has.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Bill, because there was a follow-up to this video on Reddit a couple of days ago, and it said, I'm a cop, and I've been on protest lines. There are actually professional protesters who do this kind of stuff. They'll harass and annoy the police in order to get a reaction that they can then photograph and sell the pictures to media outlets. They basically look for cops they'll think will break, or they'll go down the line looking for a reaction, which is what I'm guessing the lady with the balloon was doing. Well, guess what, social justice warriors? You've been caught out. We know there are hardly any of you, that you use the internet and broadcast media to inflate your numbers and your influence, and that you're about as effective, as a balloon animal. And if you don't like hearing the truth, well, don't worry. I'll be made to pay the price soon enough.
No!
There you go. And that is the Right Angle on Social Justice Warriors. And remember, Right Angle and many other shows are all made possible by the paying members of BillWhittle.com. So click on over, think about becoming a member yourself, and support the news programming that you want to see. And we'll see you next time.